So I'm back, and today we're going to take a look at this little thing, or not really, this is part of a thing that I'm going to show you. One of my lenses that I've used quite a bit for macro photography, or if you really can call it macro photography. As you can see on this, it says PK-Nikon. What this is actually, it's a Pentax K bayonet to Nikon F-type bayonet adapter. Well, the backstory for this lens that I'm going to show you is that I went into a second-hand store locally, and they had this cabinet with all camera gear, some lenses and so on. Most of it was Pentax and so on. But I found one lens that looked brand new. It was like it's never been used. It even had some decals on it. There was, a paper slit that was on the focusing mechanism. And I told the clerk I want to have a look at this lens. And they said, well, this looks brand new, and yeah, all of that, yada, yada, yada. And I said, nah, I think this looks more like something from the 70s. And they couldn't understand that it was that old and looked that good in condition. But anyway, I had a great look at the bayonet fixing, and I thought, well, this looks like Nikon F. Well, I bought the lens. It was inexpensive, and I thought, well, I liked it because it looked cool. And that's the number one red flag right there, because don't look at it if it's cool or not, look if it's the right for your camera. Hence this little thing, it was Pentax K and I have Nikon. So anyway, I had to buy this adapter to be able to use the lens in question. And what lens is that? Well, if you look back, I have another lens of this particular brand name, and I know that this brand name has a little bit of a bad reputation, but this, I believe, is the cult following example that this is the exception that proves the rule. It's this beauty. The Vivitar Series 1 70 to 210 zoom lens. A little bit of a backstory. This lens was made in the 70s up until I believe the early 1990s, but it was made in different versions. As I found on some forums, this was made in at least 5 different versions, where version 1 to version 3 were the most sought after, those that that worked the best, that was the best quality. The number 1 version was even made, as it says on the forums, don't quote me on this completely, but I think it might be true, it was actually made in collaboration with a NASA optics engineer. But anyway, it's a Vivitar lens, and after doing some research, I actually come to realize that this is actually a first generation. So that actually was what made me actually get this converter as well. But anyway, it's a Vivitar Series 1, and the way I could tell that this was a first generation is that if you look at these lines here, they're all parallel. Only the first versions of this had it. Second of all, if you look at the serial number, as you can see here, it starts with the number 22. And that was apparently a marker for that this is a first generation. And side note also, the front lens cover is metal, it's not plastic. And all of that made me realize that I had actually gotten a bit of a gem. Because I use this lens now quite a bit, and it's really great. Let's see if I can do this. Red dot against red dot. I was actually a bit fooled by this but it turns out that the Pentax K mount is basically, it looks very much like a Nikon F mount, only mirror imaged. So anyway, I got this lens, and they said it had a dedicated macro setting. And the way you actually enter the macro mode on this, it's a little bit tricky. You have this huge, great big focusing ring, and what you do is you turn it all the way so you see the macro, then you zoom all the way in, and you feel a little bit of a detent, and you hold it there, or rather I should hold it back here. You make sure that the aperture on its maximum, which on this lens it goes from 22 to 3.5, so make sure it's on 3.5. You press on this little white button here, and you turn it all until the micro logos align with each other. And you also see that this has popped up again. So now this lens is in macro mode. And instead of focusing with the twist action, you actually focus with the zoom. And you can always use the aperture also to get the desired effect. One little thing that is with this lens in the configuration I have, that I use a Pentax lens on a Nikon body, is that it becomes a completely analog lens. Even though this was analog from the beginning, it becomes even more analog now, because as you can see here, you have the Nikon F-type bayonet, but, and it's a big but, the lever for the aperture control doesn't interact with the camera body, which makes it so that if you turn the aperture dial on this lens, you will get the direct effect on the camera. So when you close down the aperture on this, you will see that in real time. It won't just happen when you take the photo, it will happen as you're doing it. So that's a bit of a, not drawback, but it actually makes you appreciate the art of photography a bit more, because it's like you always have it in preview mode, so you can always see exactly what's going to happen. But anyway, if you find this lens and you find it for your specific camera model, I would say that this is a great little analog lens and a great addition to your photographic gear. If you're into, and if you want to do some very extreme close-up, this has the dedicated macro setting. I don't really know if it's a full macro, but for what it is, I would really recommend it, and they are going on eBay right now for not much money at all. So even though this is not a Nikon lens, and I'm just a complete amateur, I'm just a happy amateur, I would really recommend it, because if you're starting out in photography, get this lens. It has a ample, or for me at least, it has a good highest f-stop of 3.5 to 22, and it's able to take some really good quality pictures. And one thing that is specific to this version of the 5 reincarnations is that the first version, I don't know about the others, but I know about this as well, some zoom lenses change aperture. The maximum aperture changes with zoom. This is constant. So if you put this on aperture 3.5, it will stay aperture 3.5 throughout the entire zoom range. It doesn't matter if you're at 70 or 210 millimeter, this will always stay the same aperture no matter where you are. So that's actually one thing that this lens is good for. You can always count on that it has the aperture you have set on it. So that's all for me, and I'll see you in the next video.